You're listening to Little Green Cheese, episode 76. Well, welcome back. I'm Gavin Weber, and this podcast is where you can learn about cheese making at home. I'm trying a bit of an experiment this week. I'm actually videoing the podcast, so I'm recording while I am doing the audio version as well. Now, hopefully I won't have many visual cues, but you'll get to see what it looks like when I am recording my podcast. Anyway, some exciting cheese news this week, besides the stuff that I normally do. I made my very first, no, probably not the first, maybe the second fantastic blue cheese ever. Now, those who watched the videos would have remembered that I made a farmhouse cheddar blue about 3 months ago. And the weekend just gone past, I cracked it open and had a great taste test. And it was absolutely fantastic. The marbling that you normally see, the paste was creamy and smooth, but very similar to what a cheddar is normally. You know, those young sort of cheddars you get 3 to 6 months. And the marbling of the blue all the way through it was absolutely fantastic. The look and the taste, the whole combination just blew my mind. So that was a recipe I created myself. And you will see the taste test come out very soon. I think it's this Friday. The current day I'm recording is the 3rd of July, 2018. So go and check that out. Have a look at the original farmhouse cheddar blue video, and you'll see how I made the cheese. There's a link to it in the taste test anyway. So when you pop over to cheeseman.tv, you'll see the when the video comes out, of course, you'll see the taste test. Okay, let's get on with the news. So the headline of the news is Japan's cheesemakers to aid. The headline is Japan's cheesemakers to get aid amid EU imports. So this is from the Japan News. I think it's a kind of a blog sort of thing. So I'll just read it out. The Agriculture, Forest and Fisheries Ministry will embark on measures to support the production of natural cheese made entirely in Japan, as imports of cheese products from Europe are expected to increase once the Japanese-Euro Union Economic Partnership Agreement takes place, according to sources. As for lactic acid bacteria, which plays a key role in cheese making, the nation has relied on those from overseas, but the ministry intends to help with research on lactic acid bacteria that are indigenous to Japan. It will also study processing methods suitable to the climate of the country. These efforts are aimed at domestically produced flavorful aromatic cheese. The move is aimed at countering cheese products made in Europe which have strong brand presence ahead of the planned effectuation of the Japan-EU EPA, the sources said. So basically the rest of the story goes on to say that, let me have a look. So there's a trade agreement coming into place. So I'll just read another little section here. It says, currently Japan imposes an import tariff of 29.8% on natural cheese. Regarding the Japanese EU EPA, which is expected to take place in early 2019, both sides have agreed to set up a low tariff import quota for some European products, which will be expanding gradually in the future. So basically, Japan, very much like Australia actually, import all of their cheese-making cultures, all of the direct vat inoculated ones, the freeze-dried ones, that home cheese makers are probably quite used to. So Japan doesn't have any native lactic acid bacteria that they produce themselves, so they're going to start making some of their own. So that's very interesting how trade agreements lead countries into producing something that they've never produced before, or what they have to produce. Very similar to the ban that Russia put on all of European cheese imports. So a whole bunch of Russian cheese producers have popped up making their own sorts of cheeses, and having to make having to make their own lactic bacteria, or to use raw milk and get the flavour from that. So yeah, very interesting. So I'll put the link to the story in the I will put the link to the story in the show notes. So let's get on with some cheese making questions. Now, these are voicemails sent in every week by people who, like you and me, want to learn about cheese making and have burning questions. So they send them over to me via my website, littlegreencheese.com, and you get to hear them on the show here. Anyway, let's get on with the first one. This one's from Phil.
Hi, Gavin. It's Phil Camerata from Lakewood, New York. I just received my cultures from you that I ordered a couple of weeks ago, and I'm very excited to start my double brie. However, tomorrow I am going to be trying to create your raclette. We just got back from France, and we enjoyed the raclette there, and so we're very excited to try your recipe tomorrow night. I'm going to buy, in New York State, we cannot buy raw milk, but I'm going to be trying your recipe with raw milk. I think it's 2.5 gallons, or a little bit more than 2.5 gallons. But my question for you tonight is, how in the world can I get my cheese cave, which is a converted wine cooler, uh, set to the lowest degree of 56 degrees Fahrenheit? Uh, I can only get the when I put the cheese in the refrigerator, I can only get it to about 70% humidity, and you're asking for it to be, almost 90%. So I'm putting it just on um, the mat, without the ripening box. But if I buy the ripening box, will that get it to, well, first of all, will it mold in there faster with it being sealed? And will that prevent, or will that get the temperature or the humidity to the 90%? So I'm really looking for a video on the cheese ripening ingredients, or the best cheese caves. So if you could let me know, I would greatly appreciate it. Thanks so much. Can't wait to hear from you.
No probs, Phil. Thank you very much for your question. Now, I don't know if you haven't listened to the podcast, or don't watch some of the things that I do on the Cheese Channel. Um, the so what I use to increase the humidity is that I use the ripening boxes. So wine coolers themselves don't have any humidity in them. They have little fans that suck all the moisture out, and it's a very dry little container. So what you need to do is you need to isolate each cheese, and you isolate them using ripening boxes. And you'll find that the moisture drops into underneath the mat in the ripening box and creates humidity as it evaporates. Now, I've had a hygrometer in the ripening box, and I've had it sitting between 85 and 90% relative humidity just from the moisture that just comes out of the cheese. So that's why most of my cheeses are quite successful because I don't rely on increasing the humidity in the entire fridge. I just do it for that individual cheese. So that's the best way for home cheesemakers to increase the humidity in their cheese cave. Now, if you find that the box is fairly dry and there's no moisture in it, then all you have to do is get some paper towel and just have that soaked in a little bit of water so it's moist, and you put it underneath the cheese mat. And the humidity there will keep it trapped in. And because you're going to be turning the cheese, most of the especially the washed rind cheeses, for the first couple of weeks anyway, you have to turn them every day and wash them every second day usually. You're letting enough oxygen back into that ripening box for the cheese and the bacteria to and the molds to develop around the cheese, especially as you mentioned raclette. You've got to wash that just about every day for the first couple of weeks. So, like I said, by opening the lid, taking the cheese out, you're getting rid of any buildup of carbon dioxide or whatever in the ripening box, and you're letting new oxygen in there, and then the molds will breed using that oxygen there. So you're not actually excluding oxygen out because you're turning regularly. Anyway, Phil, hopefully that answers your question and sets you on the right track. Right, the next question is from Robin.
Hi, Gavin. It's Rob Goodhand speaking from New Brunswick, Canada. I've made my very first cheese recently, and it's the Butterkase. It looks great so far, and it's now in its just finishing its first week of aging, and it's vacuum sealed. But I did notice that there's a little bit of liquid, a little bit of whey that's surrounding just a tiny bit that's around the edges of it. I'm wondering if you would recommend that I cut open the bag and then dry it again, wipe it down, and then reseal it in a different vacuum seal bag, and then let it continue on its way to aging. Anyway, either that or I'll just leave it and wait for the next 3 weeks to go by, and then we'll test it.
Thanks for your voicemail, Robin, first of all. I wouldn't worry about it. A little bit of whey, because you're putting the cheese under pressure or negative pressure using a vacuum packer, then it does pull a little bit of moisture out, and a little bit of moisture gets in the creases of the plastic. Nothing to worry about, especially for a young cheese like Butterkase. You won't have any issues at all. Now, if you recently saw my not so provolone picante cheese that I released on the 2nd of July, you would have seen that bag during the taste test. The vacuum pack bag it was in was absolutely full of whey. The vacuum pressure had sucked out so much whey out of the cheese because it was a pasta filata cheese. It shouldn't have been vacuum packed, but I just didn't know what to do with it at the time. So I vacuum packed it and forgot about it, left it at the back of the cheese fridge for a year. So what happened, there must have been about, I would say, a litre of whey that was trapped in the bag. So just a little bit like you're describing, I don't think that'll be an issue at all. Because that not so provolone picante turned out very well and nice and tasty. Probably not the same texture and flavour that it's supposed to be, but I tell you what, it's one heck of a cheese. It's got a strong kick to it. So I don't think a little bit of whey would worry your Butterkase. Anyway, hopefully that answers your question. So the next question is from Ahmed. I think it's actually congratulations. I'll just play that now.
Hi, Gavin. This is Ahmed from Montreal, Canada. Congratulations for your achievement. I'm really happy for you, man. So keep on going and let us see more and more. Congratulations again. Ahmed from Montreal. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Ahmed. Appreciate it. I think Ahmed's referring to the recent milestone I got on my YouTube channel, cheeseman.tv, of 100,000 subscribers. So, yeah, it was a good achievement and a great feeling of satisfaction that I'd reached the eyeballs, anyway, of that many people, unlike the ears of yours. Anyway, last question. This is from Dennis.
Hi, Gavin. Dennis speaking from Maryborough in Queensland. Gavin, I make two kinds of cheeses. I make the cheddar and the Jarlsberg. The Jarlsberg turns out absolutely wonderful, but the cheddar always seems to be a bit crumbly. Is there any way I can do something to get the cheddar to have the same consistency as the Jarlsberg? The Jarlsberg is beautiful and soft, creamy, firm, without any crumbliness whatsoever. But the cheddar is sometimes extremely crumbly, other times slightly crumbly. Is there anything I can do to get rid of the crumble? Thank you.
Dennis, thank you very much for your question. There's a couple of things I can think of. So the first one would be to half the cheddaring time. So when you're making cheddar, you got those steps. You cheddar over an hour, and that is what makes the texture of the cheddar. So it makes the cheddar either crumbly or drier or moister. So halve the cheddaring time that you normally do, and you will find that your cheddar cheese will be less crumbly. Another suggestion I've got is switch over to a different recipe that I've got, which is Colby. Now, Colby does taste fairly similar to cheddar, but it has the lovely smooth texture like Jarlsberg does. So it is a wash curd cheese, Colby is, similar to what Jarlsberg is, but it doesn't have the eyes. It doesn't have the eye formation. So you'll find that it does have like a cheddary flavour, a young cheddary flavour to it, but it has a better consistency and rarely is Colby crumbly. So check out my Colby video. I think the Colby recipe is actually in the first edition of Keep Calm and Eat Cheese. So if you've bought that ebook, you'll have the recipe in there. I think it might even be, I'm not sure. No, it's not on littlegreencheese.com because I put it into the book. So hopefully that answers your question, Dennis, and you get some value from that, and you can work through and make a cheese similar to your Jarlsberg, but without the eyes and no crumbliness. Thanks again. Okay, that's all we got time for this week. Don't forget that if you are in the need for any cheese making supplies, then pop over to littlegreenworkshops.com.au. We have a big cheese section there with a lot of ingredients, supplies and kits for all your cheese making needs. And we do ship globally, as you heard from both Phil and Robin have both ordered stuff and received it over there in the US and in Canada. So, pop over to littlegreenworkshops.com.au and you'll see the cheese making section. There's also a link to it at littlegreencheese.com where this podcast has its show notes, so you can check that out as well. Now, don't forget that you can also pick up some T-shirts, cups, mugs, all that sort of stuff over at my merch store. There's a link to that also at littlegreencheese.com. You've been listening to Little Green Cheese Podcast. You can pick up my ebook, Keep Calm and Make Cheese, The Beginner's Guide to Cheese Making at Home, at all good ebook retailers, including Amazon and Apple iBook Store. You can also pick up a PDF copy over at littlegreenworkshops.com.au. Now, you can see all of my video tutorials if you go over to cheeseman.tv. Thanks for listening, Curd Nerds, and I'll see you again, or listen to you. You can listen to me, that's better, in the next exciting podcast episode. You've been listening to music by Kevin MacLeod. I played Malt Shop Bop, Call to the Dairy Cows, and News Theme. Well, that was the episode. Not sure if you enjoyed that, but there's a lot of stuff that goes in between with podcasts that you don't get to see normally on video. But hope you got to see a little bit of what goes on behind the scenes for a podcast audio only episode. Thanks for watching, Curd Nerds, and I'll see you next time.